Welcome to another edition of Friends and Enemies. I'm Jeff Nyquist, and my co-host Alexander Benish is in Germany. I'm in the United States. This week, of course, Israel attacked Iran, wiped out a processing plant, I understand, for making nuclear warheads. The Iranians have shot back at Tel Aviv. There's been a lot of civilian areas hit, some Israeli headquarters. Israeli commander, I saw an Israeli naval commander was reported dead. The Israelis, of course, have attacked command centers in Iran, killing Iranian IRCG, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps officers and leaders. So there's also a Bilderberg conference going on in Stockholm, and Alex, you're going to tell us about that. So to start out, I got a little quote from Alexander Dugin on the LA riots, because, of course, everything's heating up now, not just wars in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, but apparently in California. And the California governor is taking the side of the rioters, it seems. They're rioting against ICE, supposedly. And this is what Alexander Dugin, the Russian propagandist, says: the LA riots are a carbon copy of the Maidan riots in Kiev. Same methods, same images. In Kiev, they were against Putin. In LA, they're against Trump. The globalists hate them both. Right? So that is the way the Russians are playing it. It's the globalists. Trump and Putin are natural allies, because the globalists are, of course, it's communists that organize the riots. I was talking to Trevor Loudon earlier in the week about it. There's no doubt. Communists are organizing the riots, and of course, to the extent that Moscow can manipulate conservatives into believing that this is some Western banking conspiracy, or it's the Jews, so much anti-Semitism exploding on X, on the internet, it's rather incredible. So what have you got on the Bilderbergers?
Well, that one is quite a significant conference, and it's no coincidence, I think, that the meeting place is in Stockholm, Sweden. Now, obviously, Bilderberg is supposed to be about transatlantic cooperation. Now, this started after World War II, and it's an annual secret conference. They rent out a 5-star hotel, and it's most of the time it's in Europe. Sometimes it's in the United States. I think in Virginia usually. It's heavy hitters, military, intelligence, banking, industry, media, think tanks, university people, and it's always about context. Now they give out a few talking points, right? You know what they're meeting about, but it doesn't tell you very much. It's when you look at these people that attend the conference, this is when you kind of get a picture of who they are, what they could be talking about. And as I said, the timing, right now they're meeting right now in Stockholm, Sweden. We talked about Sweden fairly recently in a show. The military cooperation, U.S. Marines, just training in Sweden. The island of Gotland and all these places. So much is happening right now, and this is kind of supposed to be what Bilderberg is all about, right? Now they've met all throughout the Cold War, and they claim that the secrecy is necessary because this is not supposed to be a public event where you have to deliver some talking points, but you can't really talk about real stuff. And at Bilderberg, they supposedly can't. It's a bit murky because you can't give out classified information, right? Let's say you're an American general going to Bilderberg, as it's the case right now. You can't talk about classified secrets to foreign people from foreign governments or foreign corporations or any corporation, right? So it's a delicate thing, right? But it's throughout the context, you can tell how much is heating up. You can tell that there's a reality beyond the media. As you just mentioned with Mr. Dugin, he can say, well, the globalists did this and the globalists did that. Well, what's the globalist? I mean, it's like in the old Soviet days when all these purges happened in the Soviet Union. in the Soviet Union over and over again, and they always had these little terms, right? They had like what they call wreckers and rightists. Didn't they call some of these guys rightists because they're not left enough?
Yeah.
And some other terms they always had,
or the Trotskyites.
For the times it was the Trotskyites, and it was the kind of these aberrationists, right? It's like these the group within a group, and if you're one of them, then you will be eliminated, and we can call you a member of that internal rebellious group and purge you, right? I mean, it's like you can designate anybody to be anything if you have the power to do so, and this is what Dugin is doing in the information sphere, because anybody can be labeled a globalist. I've been labeled a globalist, for not agreeing with somebody, or you can be called a globalist, or even Trump can be called a globalist when he stops doing what people want him to do, or anybody in the administration.
What's useful about such a vague term, because what in the heck does it mean, is that you can use it to appeal to anti-Semites because it means the Jewish bankers or whatever. The Jewish conspiracy they can claim by using globalist, or you can claim that it's a bunch of politically correct bureaucrats who want the world to be as one, like the John Lennon song. You can claim all kinds of things. The fact that there's liberal globalists and there's communist globalists, that there's different kinds of globalists is erased from this. They're all blended into one. So whatever your ideological notion, there's communists think of the globalists as the capitalists who are, of course, oppressing the workers and the poor and so on, or that they're racist because they're exploiting the third world. So there's every single flavor of political opinion or hatred can use the term globalist. So it's very ambiguous.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, right now, at this very moment, I'm not sure because of the time zone difference, because I'm in the Berlin time zone in Sweden. I'm not exactly sure what time zone they're in right now.
The same, I would think.
Pretty close. And so right now, they may still have presentations and chats, or it's a socializing time when certain people get to know each other and they talk about different subjects, and also just trying to gauge, just create sympathy, because that's kind of a big thing with the Anglos. They want to like each other, and with transatlantic relations, they're supposed to like each other, right? So right now they're talking. And certain Bilderberg members, they really don't like each other, and they really don't trust each other. So it's like a complicated thing that's going on right now. I mean, I'll get to that in a minute. It's not like they're all self-declared globalists and we're transhuman.
It's not a huddle to pauperize all the rest.
It's like right? Transhumanism and banking, Jewish conspiracy, blah blah blah. No, it's a diverse group of people who are experts in their respective field, and with some people you really can't tell what their intention is, what side they're playing for. It's very interesting if you're interested in espionage and the global acceleration of military posturing and an actual war. So let's start maybe with let's go through a few of these names, and it all relates to the stuff that's happening right now with Israel and Iran and the Russians and the Chinese and then Ukraine, everything. So this is kind of where these things happen. So in the first category here, military and intelligence, right? So you can find on candorintel.com, you can find a list of members that is sorted into categories, and there's also information on most of these people that are there. So first category, military intelligence, we have Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO. And it's so weird that these Europeans have all these people ready to take on these jobs, and most people in the world, they don't know who they are, and they're very, very secretive, especially this guy, Mark Rutte. He was Prime Minister of the Netherlands, a very tiny little country. His ancestors imported goods from the Dutch Indies and were apparently very privileged figures. It's very common in Europe, multi-generational vetting and all that. He studied at Leiden University, founded by William I of the House of Nassau-Orange. Rutte initially worked at Unilever and then had a meteoric career in politics. Throughout his career, he had to coordinate everything with Queen Beatrix, for a long time president Bilderberg, and he's got a bunch of a bunch of medals and orders, member of very elite societies. He has largely shielded himself from the public eye, even when he was just Prime Minister of the Netherlands. His image is carefully cultivated, says Wilma Borgman, Dutch journalist who has covered him for decades or tried to cover him, and recently co-authored a book called The Rutte Mystery. Quote, he doesn't let anyone get close to him, Borgman said. Of all the people we've interviewed, no one has ever come to his home. That's unusual by Dutch standards, right? It's a tiny little country. His father, Isaac Rutte, worked for a trading company initially as an importer in the colony of the Dutch East Indies, later as a director in the Netherlands. I entered the business world and blah, blah, blah. Now, the Dutch royal family consists essentially of the dynasties Orange, Nassau, Mecklenburg, and Lippe. Orange Nassau played a key role in ousting the Stuarts from the British throne, paving the way for the Hanover Welfs. And the Dutch royal family is probably one of the major shareholders in the Royal Dutch Shell Corporation. The father of the late Queen Beatrix, Prince Bernhard of Lippe-Biesterfeld, worked for Nazi conglomerate IG Farben and the SS. In 1954, Prince Bernhard initiated the Bilderberg Conference, and we've talked about this, I think, last year. It's a spy nightmare if there's backgrounds like this, and the Soviets may have found out about this, and they may have some files and photos and blah, blah, blah. This can cause a whole nightmare in terms of espionage, so that would have been nice if we've had different people starting Bilderberg and get the ball rolling with the transatlantic partnership, but unfortunately it was these guys, and now we have Mr. Mark Rutte, the mystery man, as head of NATO. Now, in general terms, we need this cooperation. We need this military cooperation. It needs to be a super solid bloc. But when people criticize NATO as an organization, there needs to be more counterintelligence, more focused approach, because if you have spies, foreign spies inside NATO, that can create massive headaches. Then we got a guy, guest at the Bilderberg conference, not too far from where I am right now, Geoffrey van Leuven, private office of the Secretary General of NATO. He attended the University of Cambridge, Anglo, also a den of spies, where he received his Master of Philosophy in International Affairs in the 90s, completed military service as an officer in the Royal Netherlands Army, positions in several embassies in the foreign ministry, so he should be no stranger to the spy game. He should be competent in that. Van Leuven became advisor to Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who was Prime Minister back then, for foreign affairs and defense affairs in 2020. And in 2023, he was sworn in by King Willem-Alexander, the king, as Minister of Foreign Trade and International Development. So let's hope he is competent. Now we get some Americans here. James H. Baker, not to be confused with the other James Baker, who used to be a long-standing figure in American politics. No, this is James H. Baker, former Director, Office of Net Assessment, Department of Defense. He is an American foreign policy advisor, blah, 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 National War College, master's degree in national security studies, certificate programs at MIT, Harvard Business School, so he must be smart, I hope. He was responsible for providing the United States Secretary of Defense with comparative assessments of the prospects of the military capabilities of the United States relative to other actors, as well as the political, economic, and regional implications of those assessments. Oh, that's a staunch task. Previously served as a strategist and advisor to two chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So obviously you need to combine different levels of expertise. You can't just have generals because they may be just too focused on specific tasks. Then we got at Bilderberg Christopher Donahue, commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa section. So he was busy, has experience with operations Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, New Dawn, and a bunch of others. He met with senior Ukrainian military commanders to begin the partnership with the United States during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This included providing Ukraine with intelligence and weapons. According to the New York Times, Donohue's collaboration with Ukrainian General Mikhailo Zabrodsky was critical to the military support provided to Ukraine by the United States and other NATO countries. This was done from the United States Army Europe and Africa headquarters in Wiesbaden, that's in Germany, where US and other NATO military and intelligence officers established facilities to direct the operation in support of Ukraine. In November 2024, Donohue was nominated for promotion to general and appointed as commanding general of the United States Army Europe, Africa, and Allied Land Command. So these are kind of the people that meet right now at Bilderberg, and yeah, it's like this guy must have, or probably has, the blessing of Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and so it's like, it's not what the internet is necessarily saying, right? It's like when you support Ukraine, you must be a globalist, right? I mean, this guy doesn't really strike me as a globalist at all. He's a United States military officer, and he's doing his job, right? He's just doing his job. And we get Kevin Harrington at Bilderberg, Senior Director for Strategic Planning, National Security Council. He formerly was with Thiel Capital, an investment firm founded by Peter Thiel. Now, we got to the Thiels later. They're a bit strange and complicated. Then we got Samuel Paparo, Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. He assumed command in 2024. It's the U.S. military's largest geographic command. In November of 2024, he stated that the supply of air-to-air missile systems to Ukraine and Israel since the beginning of the conflicts there had significantly reduced the stockpiles available in the Indo-Pacific Command area and jeopardized its ability to counter China. Fair point. That's why the Europeans have to step up, and Europe has to supply more missiles to Israel and also to Ukraine. And we got John Sawers. He's listed as the executive chair of New Bridge Advisory Limited. He's actually a British diplomat and aristocrat. From 2009 to 2014, he headed the Secret Intelligence Service of Britain, MI6. So he was quite a busy guy. Served at the British Embassy in Washington. He was foreign policy advisor to Tony Blair during the Kosovo conflict, and on and on and on. Sawers worked on UK policy in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Balkans, and so on and so forth. So yeah, he's like a traditional spy chief. And lastly, we got Nicolas Roche, Secretary General Secretariat for Defense and National Security of France. Diplomat and also diplomat, graduate from elite universities, French embassies in the United States and Israel as a counselor, and some other tasks. Now, Secretary General for Defense and National Security. Does that sound like a bunch of globalists to you, according to the internet definition of a globalist?
Well, at least not Alex Jones's definition. It's the stereotyping, the thinking in simple terms about politics, where everything can be reduced very quickly to a cartoon. This is not what you really want. You want to have real depth and know the nuances of what different people stand for. Europe isn't one thing. America is not one thing. I have friends who would say that America is evil now because it's gone to the left. It's too far to the left, and they feel uncomfortable here. Rather than fighting for it, of course, which these particular people never really did do anything effectively to fight for what's right in America. They're now blaming America is now bad because it's not 100% the way they want it to be. And so it's Russia is good. China is good. It's best that America be destroyed. They get something out of the Old Testament. America has to be destroyed. This is not constructive. But the whole conspiracy mentality, the whole destructive nature of these kind of narratives, they're very negative. And they're not positive. And there's also a kind of hopelessness everything's always bad, the bad guys are always winning. And rather than exposing the truth, they have a narrative that actually the Russians and people like Alexander Dugin are exploiting because they want people here to be demoralized and they want them to be against their own country.
Yeah, it's like if anybody, if anybody on the internet or traditional media or whatever, if anybody has something negative to say about these guests that I just mentioned, I mean, I'm very skeptical of Mr. Rutte. I'm very, I don't trust that guy a lot. I don't trust specific aristocrats in Europe, but that's fine. I can make that argument, but it's not like everybody's bad in that category, right? There's some very capable people, and it's like when it's your job to be a military officer, correct? It's not your job to do the politics as well. So you can criticize certain people for having participated in Operation Iraqi Freedom and in all these different these wars that are in the past. But you have to understand how complex this is, right? You've been trained as a general, and then the politicians say we go to war, and then you go to work. And it's like you can't blame everybody for everything. Or you can selectively blame a single individual for everything else that other people have been deciding. And it's like it's very complicated, and everybody has a different mentality. It's like a politician has a different mentality than a general, right? And some of these people, they may have even voiced concern internally about certain operations or a certain type of conducting operations, right? So they always have the option to talk things internally, not necessarily in public, and a lot of stuff you never see in the public view. Okay, let's get to the politics category at Bilderberg right now in Sweden. Right, these are the politicians. And we have Julia Klöckner from Germany, president of the parliament, essentially. She completed once the Young Leader Program of the American Council on Germany, a partner project of the think tank Atlantic Bridge and the American Council on Germany. So this is kind of like very, very old school. Her party is the CDU, Mainline Conservative Party. This party has always been pro-America. And there's all kinds of stuff in the background. There's not just these organizations, right? The Young Leader Program of the American Council on Germany. There's also some other networks that go back a long time. So this is kind of a shift in German politics recently. So it's now back to a more classic approach. And the mainline left party is now freaking out because the mainline left party now, they're still trying. They recently had a manifesto calling for normalizing relations with Russia, and this is the old talk and the old baloney that they've been trying to do for a long time. So, but now things have shifted, and so that's that. Then we have Radoslav Sikorski from Poland. He's listed as Minister of Foreign Affairs right now. He's had many different positions and jobs. Many different important jobs in Poland, and in 1981 he left the People's Republic of Poland and studied philosophy, politics, and economics at Pembroke College, Oxford University. During his studies, he was a member of the highly exclusive and notorious student organization, the Bullington Club. Very, very elite. He worked as a foreign correspondent for The Spectator and The Observer. He's been to complicated places. And Sikorski is married to the American historian and Pulitzer Prize winner Anne Applebaum, also a Bilderberg participant on a regular basis. He has 2 children with her. Anne Applebaum is an expert on the Soviet era, the gulags, the Holodomor in Ukraine, and other things. She's very soft on the Anglos, and she could have played a bigger role in maybe pointing out some of the bad apples among the Anglos and the mistakes that have been made. But she's usually focused on criticizing the Eastern regimes. I've read several books. I think I own most of her, or all of her recent recent books. I think it's always worth a read. Then we got Sophie Wilmès, Vice President, European Parliament. She's from Belgium, complicated place. She served as acting Prime Minister of Belgium a couple of years ago. Her father was a member of the board of directors of the National Bank of Belgium. Her mother is Jewish and lost several family members in the Holocaust. Elected to the European Parliament, served as vice president of the European Parliament since July 2024. So, okay, Jewish background, lost people in the Holocaust, but then she's at Bilderberg, right? And there's some people at Bilderberg who have a background connections to some certain aristocrats who used to be very close to the Nazis, and some of the corporations that had some dealings with the Nazis. So they're not all the same. Not everybody who goes to Bilderberg is the same, right? They're not all in it together, right? It's complicated, and not everybody likes each other. And not everybody's left either. Then we got Michael Kratzios, Director, White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Okay, very important scientific advisor to the president since 2025. He used to be a principal or a high-ranking figure at Thiel Capital, these guys again. Chief of Staff to entrepreneur and venture capitalist Peter Thiel. He's about artificial intelligence, quantum information science, architect of the American AI Initiative, and on and on and on. He also headed the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, the Missile Defense Agency, the Defense Innovation Unit, Space Development Agency, and the DoD Laboratory and Enterprise. He managed a research and development budget of $106 billion, the largest in the world. That's almost like the entire Russian military spending for a year. In February of 2024, he announced his engagement to Alyssa Davies, the eldest daughter of Sir David Davies. Okay, so cross connection, America and Europe. Then we got Alexander Stubb, President of the Republic of Finland. So he's heading Finland since 2024. Now we talked about the whole thing between Finland and Russia. They have quite a lot to talk about at Bilderberg this year, I would suppose. Who else we got? Jason Smith from the U.S., member of Congress. So, in April, he traveled to El Salvador, given a tour of the Center for Terrorism Confinement, a detention center established by the Trump administration to hold U.S. immigrants forcibly removed from the United States, and on and on and on. So you know anything about Jason Smith? I wasn't aware of him.
No, I don't know anything.
Yeah, but it's like some of these people, they become more important as time goes on after they visit Bilderberg, and they make some friends. Then we got Wolfgang Schmidt from Germany, former federal minister for special tasks, former head of the chancellery, and that's kind of a weird character. Now, he used to be, or was considered to be, the closest confidant of Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Now, Scholz was, oh my god, I mean, we talked about him a few times over the last months. Olaf Scholz, he used to be a young socialist back in the day, visiting Soviet or Sovietized East Germany. East Germany, he was treated like a head of state, even though he was a young communist, and he's talked all the talk against NATO back then. He was responsible for the safety of the city of Hamburg, if I remember correctly, when these Al Qaeda people were there, and then these Al Qaeda people went to the United States and to the U.S. and did 9/11. So, if they had bugged some places, if they had done some proper police work in Hamburg, 9/11 probably would have been prevented. And when 9/11 happened, and the aftermath and the new U.S. Foreign policy, the party of Olaf Scholz used all of that to essentially badmouth the United States and bring Europe closer to Russia, just for reference. So what is this guy doing at Bilderberg right now, Wolfgang Schmidt? Why is he there? In the 2000s, he was a member of the executive board of the European Community Organization of Socialist Youth. He was on the board of the Young Socialists and vice president of the International Union of Socialist Youth, the youth organization of the Socialist International. So why do they keep this guy around at Bilderberg? I mean, is he supposed to... Do they want him to talk to the leftists and say, well, please not be so much for Russia these days, or stop doing this nonsense about normalizing relations with the Russians and keep it low key with the Chinese, please? Maybe that's why they keep him around. Maybe that's why they invited him to Bilderberg this year. We got Valentini, Deputy Minister of Enterprise and other stuff in Italy. Also a complicated guy. He worked for Berlusconi, and Berlusconi was sort of close to the Russians. And Mr. Valentini did some travel work, again, doing work for or representing Italian companies abroad, particularly in Russia. He began traveling with Berlusconi. And during this time, Berlusconi began sending him to Moscow to follow negotiations between Eni and Gazprom. Eni is also a big corporation. And they talked outside of official diplomatic channels. He was in contact with Antonio Falicio of Zao Banca Intesa, a Gazprom advisor. And in 2005, he was awarded the Order of Lomonosov by Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to a document published by WikiLeaks, in January of 2009, Ronald Spogli, U.S. ambassador to Rome, described him as Berlusconi's key figure in Russia, traveling several times a month without staff or a secretariat. It is unclear what he does in Moscow, but there are strong rumors that he's protecting Berlusconi's interests in Russia. And of course, these people will deny any sort of wrongdoing. So, what do you think? What do you think? Why these guys are still invited to Bilderberg?
Well, they were statesmen. They were important people. But of course, I don't know the people who organized the event. So I'm not sure exactly if they want to get together. Of course, it's secret. They want to get together. They want to discuss things amongst themselves, and of course, they have a lot to discuss right now with the Russia attacking Ukraine. I would love to be a fly on the wall to know what they're saying about that, because in your country, in Germany, the Social Democratic Party has now come out with. Like a manifesto, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And it's about, well, we need to deal with Russia. We need to be closer to Russia, right?
Yeah, we should talk about peace. We should get talks, even though people have been talking for years, and the Russians, they still have maximum demands, which are capitulation of Ukraine. So and so at
Bilderberg, I want to know, what are the people lining up to say, well, we need to end this war and we need to not support Ukraine and we need to get along with Russia? I would like to know those names, because at a secret conference they can make these positions and nobody's allowed to tell on them that they're taking Russia's side. And obviously, that's maybe the cover some of these people want.
Yeah, and obviously, it's just responsible to mention the basics here when you talk about a guy like Valentini, right? It's like you don't necessarily know what they were about. Just because they traveled to Russia doesn't tell you the whole story. I mean,
Well,
just to be clear.
Berlusconi is famously a Putin guy, and he was a
Yeah.
corrupt
But
Italian
still,
conservative politician, right?
this is Valentini. He's not Berlusconi. You know, what was his game, or what were the people around him thinking? What was the plan? Because it's like, how do you get close to the Russians? How do you talk to the Russians? You need to have business dealings and this, that, and the other. I mean, there's so many possibilities what was behind that, but of course, for a long time, energy dependency became a big problem in Europe, especially for us Germans. We became incredibly dependent on Russian gas, and there were two defectors. Just a couple of years ago, two defectors. They ratted out the Russians. They tried to blindside us. They wanted to leave us in the cold without gas in the winter, and this could have, put our economy into shambles, and this could have caused riots.
Your
in the street.
economy in shambles.
Yeah, would have, because it's all gas dependent, and it would have meant people rioting in the streets, and obviously the Russians would have then tried to amplify the riots in German streets. It was close. It was dangerous, and it was a dangerous game that was played for a long time. And it's kind of strange that some people are still invited to Bilderberg at this point. But obviously now the game has changed, and Putin has kind of isolated himself somewhat, and a lot of people were suicided in Russia in the recent years, because they wanted to go back. They're not necessarily good guys over there in Russia. They just want to go back to the old times when you made a bunch of money. You could travel everywhere. You could have your sons and daughters shopping in Monaco and driving around sports cars in Paris and in London. But now it's all difficult and miserable. And so some of these Russians, they want to go back to the old times, right? And so there's still unofficial channels of communication, and maybe some people can turn some Russians around, maybe not, we'll see. It's complicated. So then we got Maroš Šefčovič, European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security. He worked for Barroso. It's a whole bag of problems, these Portuguese politicians. I mean, you want to talk about some shady characters there. Then we got David van Veel from the Netherlands again, Minister of Justice and Security. Very prestigious positions, very security related positions. Served as foreign and defense policy advisor to Prime Minister Mark Rutte, and some other stuff. And broadcasting company NOS noted that Van Veel appeared more frequently in public following the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. Now, again, the Netherlands is a small country, but these people have connections all over the place, and this becomes more important now when we are so close to a world war. Then we got Edouard Philippe, former Prime Minister of France. We got some other people. I'll just skip a few of those. And we got Jeremy Hunt from Great Britain, Member of Parliament. Actually, Sir Jeremy Hunt served as the Chancellor of the Exchequer from 22 to 24, Foreign Secretary from 2018 to 2019. Had a few important jobs. He studied at Oxford, and through a paternal great-grandmother, Hunt is a descendant of Sir Stransome Master, a pioneer of the East India Company. He's also a distant relative of Queen Elizabeth II, who's now dead, and of British Union of Fascists leader Sir Oswald Mosley, who also had lots of aristocratic connections.
Also was kind of pro-Hitler. Oswald Mosley was interned during World War II. I think they put all those people in the olive white, if I'm remembering right. And they didn't... anybody that had pro-German connections or sympathies was subject to being interned during the war in Great Britain. Just the way we interned the Japanese and some more prominent Italian and fascist and Nazi-connected people
Yeah,
in the
and
U.S.
it's like guys like Jeremy Hunt and all the family background and stuff. It's not like you can call him a globalist in the traditional conspiracy sense. I mean, does it get more conservative than some of these guys at Bilderberg? You know, son of an admiral of the Royal Navy, Oxford, all these family connections, all these different jobs. I mean, there's some people who they tick all the boxes when it comes to conservative and very old style way of running things. But also, I mean, the British Empire had a global scale. So can you call, I mean, who you call a globalist, right? I mean, if all other empires or current empires like the Chinese empire, the Chinese have global ambitions, the Russians certainly have global ambitions. I mean, you can call anybody a globalist these days, I think. But it's complicated. Then we got Mario Monti from Italy. He's senator for life. He was an international consultant to Goldman Sachs and Coca-Cola, very ambitious person. Let's put it at that. Who else we got? Lots of European bureaucrats, another high-powered German politician, very pro-US. The Turkish Minister of Finance, Mehmet Şimşek. He used to study in the United Kingdom. He worked for Merrill Lynch at London. So very international guy. Then we got Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, Great Britain, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, member of the Privy Council, which is not uncommon for these Labour guys, these leftist guys in Britain, for strange reasons. Some more European guys. Then we got someone from Sweden, Magdalena Andersson, leader of the Social Democratic Party. Now, we know from the defectors in the Cold War that the Russians or the Soviets had massively infiltrated these European parties, the social democratic parties, all of them. And they bragged about it, and they said, we control like so many of them, and we can make them do whatever we want them to do. So that's always a red flag, right? In Europe, if you are a social democrat, unfortunately, that's what it is. That's an instantaneous red flag. She served as prime minister of Sweden from 21 to 22, brief period. But in 22, 11 weeks after Russian forces began their invasion of Ukraine on the orders of Putin, Andersson advocated for Sweden's immediate accession to NATO. The Swedish parliament voted in favor of NATO membership by a majority, with only the Left Party and the Greens voting against. So not everything is what it seems to be. It's complicated. And it's like the Russians, they don't have as many friends here as they think they do, or as many subservient assets as the Russians think they do. We'll see.
So what is the attitude now? I mean, right now with the attack, we haven't discussed the bombings in the Middle East, the missile strikes. Israel has attacked Iran. They have attacked a nuclear processing plant for building nuclear warheads. They have attacked the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters. They've killed some generals. The Iranians apparently are being fairly frank about the kind of damage, but they're striking back with large missile strikes of their own. And of course now we've already seen Trump is pulling out anti-missile defenses out of Ukraine to send to the Middle East, which is really damaging to Ukraine. And there's resources that were otherwise slated for Ukraine going to go to Israel. What do you make of this, and what are Europeans saying? Anything that you have tracked?
Well, I saw this coming 10 years ago. I wrote a book 10 years ago saying it's going to happen starting, at the earliest in 2020. It's going to happen in stages, and there's going to be wars in all these places, also with the Iranians. But But I mean, people saw this coming. I mean, people saw what was happening in the last couple of years. Israeli strikes against Iran, the Iranians trying to make nuclear weapons and becoming a player in that sense. All this stuff that leaked or it was publicized about inspectors finding or anybody finding highly enriched uranium in Iran, stuff they were not supposed to have, and all this rhetoric, all this Islamic fanaticism that was happening in the last couple of years. So people understand here that Iran is a huge problem. Iran could have gone several different ways, but they want to be old school. They want to be an empire, or they want to be part of a Muslim empire. But at this stage, at this day and age, all these Muslim countries managed to do was to become assets of the Russians, essentially. I mean, everybody understands that Iran largely depends on Russia, and they're working together. There have been, I think, 4 different military fronts. 4 different fronts that were prepared against Israel from Iran and some Palestinian organizations and some of these groups. And there's always Russia in the background. There's always Moscow in the background. And everybody knows it. And everybody is kind of coming to terms with what that means. And it's like Israel is such a tiny little country, right? And right next to it is all these big, large Muslim countries, and it's this 1,500 years worth of Islamic classic imperialism. And that's just the people are just coming to terms with that situation. I mean, most people haven't been paying much attention to Israel, but when Iran is
my
involved,
goodness, there's so much obsession about the Jews. I can't believe on X how much hate Israel's getting right now. And of course, I must say that it's Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, made a statement that impressed me years ago. He said, never start a preemptive war, because you're going to be responsible for everything that happens after you've started it. And of course, the problem is, the dilemma that Israel has is, if Iran gets the bomb, Israel's such a small country, the bomb can really destroy Israel. One bomb could effectively annihilate Tel Aviv, and that would destroy Israel as a country, or it could potentially do that. And so they don't want Iran to get the bomb, so they've had the dilemma of launching a preemptive war. The United States did not participate in the attack, which a lot of people thought we might. It was Israel going it alone, but we are giving support. And just to give an overview of what the attack is like, Israeli forces launched over 200 airstrikes against Iran that were carried out, targeting nuclear facilities and military leaders. And of course, the Iranians are saying that 78 people have been killed with 320 injured. They've responded with dozens of non-nuclear missile strikes on Tel Aviv. But Iran has threatened that if the United States, France, or the UK help Israel, they will start to attack those countries. And of course, the U.S. is going to be helping, not directly by fighting, but by giving military supplies or technical support to Israel to help them stop Iranian missiles, because they're pulling out anti-missile equipment.
Yeah, and
from
then
Ukraine.
the internet will call Donald Trump a globalist, and Donald Trump an asset of the Jewish conspiracy, right? It's just what's
They will.
Happen.
This is what's going to happen, and of course, they're going to say. People are already saying this. This division. I never thought I'd see. What is the girl, the black girl in the U.S. that's become very anti-Israel?
Owens.
Candace Owens. She's. I read one of her tweets yesterday, and it was just virulently hateful to Israel. I can't really understand the emotion, why an American would feel such hatred for Israel. But she referring to America as being colonized by Israel, which of course has always been
Classic
ridiculous.
mythology.
It's an impossible mythology. This idea, and I recommend everybody. Of course, people are going to attack me for this, but Warrant for Genocide. This is one of the best books on the Jewish conspiracy mythology, and this is Norman Cohen. This goes into the history of the Jewish conspiracy myth, where it came from, all the forgeries and false claims that go into this idea that the Jews control the world, or they control banking, or they control America. What was it? Zionist occupation government, Zog, was the anti-Semitic phrase for America. And of course, you had the Oklahoma City bombing, which was, very famous, and it was inspired by an anti-Semitic text. A famous American anti-Semite wrote a novel about a bombing.
Diaries.
Turner Diaries, and this was going to be the model for Timothy McVeigh. And it's interesting, I've said this before, but Timothy McVeigh was put, of course, when he was arrested and caught, he was put in prison, and one of the people he became friends with in prison was the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski was like an environmentalist, anti-capitalist. He lived in a cabin in the woods, and he mailed out these bombs that maimed and killed. Yeah, he had a very high IQ. He ended up getting caught after, I think it was years that he was maiming and killing people with his bombs. Very clever fellow, mail bombs. Hard to catch a criminal like that. Very smart. But he was in jail with McVeigh, and they got to be friends. And Kaczynski was interviewed after McVeigh's execution, because McVeigh was executed under U.S. law for his crime. And he said, well, McVeigh was a good guy. And he kept telling me, well, we have the same enemy. You guys on the left and we on the right, you have the same enemy, which is the U.S. government, right? The ZOG, the Zionist occupation government. The left wants to attack it from the left because they are communists, and of course the right wants to attack it because it's Jewish. And it's very funny how these two themes, if you can get the right into this Jewish mythology thing, they end up lining up just the same way Stalin and Hitler did it to start off World War II, right? They end up in an alignment. And of course, the communists, once they've used the Nazi right or the anti-Semitic right, they kick them to the curb, right? And they end up falling out. But this is the pattern. And of course, after World War II, the Nazi diaspora, a large portion of it was controlled by the Soviet intelligence. And if Hitler did escape the bunker, which I don't really think is true, though a lot of people have written books about it, how he got away to Argentina, it would have been with the help of the Soviets. Could only have been that.
And also, if people look at, if people really look at older history, the European empires, they've been playing the imperial game for so long, and they never needed a Jewish conspiracy behind them. A supposed Jewish world conspiracy never invented any new trick, right? Because Napoleon did what he did because he wanted to expand his empire and push back against the British Empire. And the British Empire, they've been doing this for a long time, and they never needed any sort of Jewish conspiracy to just play the game. Or the Nazis. The Nazis thought, war would save the German Empire, and they made that decision. And nobody needs a Jewish conspiracy to make a decision like that. Or when the Russians earlier, under the Tsars, when the Russians escalated things, mobilizing a huge force, like 1.5 million soldiers, when the Russians under the Tsars really got the ball rolling, that eventually turned into World War I, the Russians didn't need a Jewish conspiracy to do so. There was no Jewish conspiracy to facilitate the game, the imperial game that's been around for 10,000 years, right? It's like all these people like Candace Owens and others, they read in these conspiracy books, and they watch conspiracy videos, and there's always the same narrative that all these European empires. They were lured into warfare against each other because of some Jewish people, like some little Jewish families. They played everybody against each other. No, it was just the game. They always try to attack each other. European empires, they always try to form a bigger alliance to smash a weaker alliance. They always try to find new money for a new war, spy on each other, have temporary alliances. They switched all the time. This was just the game, the Austrian Empire, right? The Habsburg Empire, and the French, and the various German ones, and the British, and the Portuguese, and the Spanish. They always try to scam each other and trick each other. There was no Jewish conspiracy to make that happen. That was just the reality of imperial warfare. And so in this stretches right into the present day, where nobody needs a Jewish conspiracy to make these decisions. The decisions of the Chinese to do this, that, and the other, and the Russians and some of the others, and in India and the Iranians and whatnot. So it's like and for the longest time, these European empires, they have for a long time they had employed a few Jewish people. They've recruited a few Jewish people to perform certain tasks, some diplomatic tasks, some economical tasks. But this was just a very basic style of operating, and there was not just a few Jewish people that were recruited. It was all kinds of people that were recruited to perform tasks. And that's just it. So you can't explain 10,000 years worth of imperial recorded history. You can't explain that with this Jewish thing, the Elders of Zion. Because apparently the Elders of Zion, who don't even exist, they never invented a new trick. Oh, playing people against each other? Really? Like getting other people to fight each other? That's like the oldest trick ever. And
yeah, that's a pretty old trick. And the myth of the Jewish world conspiracy. There's the rabbi's speech, which is completely untrue. There's the protocols of the Elders of Zion. This has always been at the bottom of this. You'll find the protocols is very popular in the Arab world, in the Muslim world right now, and of course, just as you have this Jewish conspiracy theory, you've got the Nazi conspiracy theory, right? Operation Paperclip, the Americans became Nazified. This is Joseph Farrell and Catherine Austin Fitz's propaganda.
Plaything.
And you'll find the same people who hate Israel and believe in this Jewish conspiracy also believe in this Nazi conspiracy that America has been Nazified. And it's so peculiar. You see it when Ukraine is being accused of being Nazi and they have a Jewish president. And then they're the Rothschilds are behind Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are the Khazars, right? It's just crazy how these things are used. Of course, the Russians, they like to use both, because the Russians, of course, invented the protocols, was an invention of the Russian secret police, more than 125 years ago. And of course, it was inherited by the communists, and they found it useful because, remember, one of Marx's earlier writings, he wrote on the Jewish question. And of course, the Jew was initially the stereotype of the evil capitalist. So there was this linkage between anti-capitalism, people who hated the free market, and they would use the Jew as sort of a stereotype to attack the market system. And of course, this was very popular among to get Christians riled up, because of course it's the synagogue of Satan.
And you got it past censorship easier if you
called
all the bad stuff Jewish. It was easier to get it past censorship. You couldn't attack the governments directly in Europe, But if you said,
right?
well, it's the Jewish thing, and you could
And you
sneak it by.
implied that the Jews controlled the governments in Europe, right? You
Yeah.
implied this control, and of course it started with Napoleon because under the French Revolution and Napoleon, the Jews were emancipated. When Napoleon came into Italy and took over Italy, they emancipated the Jews. The Jews were ghettoized. They didn't have the same rights. So the more liberal ideas of the French Revolution, as they spread across Europe, Jewish emancipation. So obviously the French Revolution was a Jewish conspiracy, right? This is the argument that they used to say that the Jews were evil. And of course, they were a pariah people because they had
Yeah,
not
but
accepted
isn't it like
Christianity. So it was easy to get the mob in Christian countries to be against them and to then use these narratives in very destructive
But
ways.
isn't it like the biggest circular reasoning fallacy, illogical garbage when people say, well, it's very simple. It's like, you had the traditional empires, classic empires, especially in Europe, but to a lesser degree, early United States, very classical, very Roman, inspired by the Roman Empire, inspired by the Greek Empire, and blah, blah, blah. Classic empires, always well, always fine and traditional, and on, but then came the Jewish conspiracy, this supposed satanic Jewish conspiracy, poisoning these classic empires and ultimately destroying these classic empires, right? This is how the mythology explains it, right? But if you make this mental experiment and imagine if these empires had just continued the way they've always been, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Germans, Austria, and Spain, and all the other, if they all had continued just like they always did, and then acquired modern technology and modern weaponry, all these empires, without any Jewish influence whatsoever, not a single Jew anywhere, no Jewish people whatsoever. If these empires had continued in a traditional way, they all would have expanded their global reach. They all would have tried to form new alliances, have a more global presence, and control the people more. But you could call that globalism. You could call that breaking down national barriers,
Well, in the 19th century,
creating superstructures, and just doing away with tradition. Wait a second. Now we're in a logical circular reasoning fallacy.
I mean, in truth, in the 19th century, it was a century of globalization because Europe colonized the rest of the world, and they brought the whole world together in a large market system. And that's that was. You could call that globalization. The period from the end of the, Napoleon's exile to Elba, or to St. Helena after Waterloo, before 1914, you had this process where the world was, trade was expanding, the countries were getting richer, all modernization. There weren't that many wars in this period. There weren't great wars like there was during the Napoleonic period or World War I, World War II, and so this was a period of tremendous expansion and growth. And of course, this is a period when this anti-Semitism started to really become entrenched on the right among nationalists, especially in Central Europe, and of course in Germany. And you had the Dreyfus affair in France, which was again rose up the French anti-Semites because Dreyfus was a French military officer who was allegedly a spy for Germany. You had all these controversies, and it became something that where you get Hitler, who grew up in this period, absorbed all this stuff. He's kind of they call him a gutter snipe. He was self-educated. He came to power, and he used the protocols in this Jewish mythology as the basis for his regime.
Yeah.
And the basis was the Jewish Bolshevism was the enemy in the East, and Jewish capitalism was the enemy in the West. And he could go to the factory owners and he could say, "Look, I'm fighting Jewish Bolshevism. I'm on your side." To the industrialists, and then the bankers, and then he would turn to the mob, to the workers, whoever, and say, "Look, I'm on your side. I'm against Jewish capital in the West." So
Yeah.
he could win over both groups. He could play both sides of the table. And by using anti-Semitism, he didn't have to spell out his position. Each would hear a different sound when they heard it, when they heard
Yeah, and
the
it's like
anti-Jewish
it was
stuff.
so hard. It was so hard for Jewish people, so hard for Jewish people to defend themselves against this propaganda because for the longest time there was no Jewish state. Because once you have a state and it's official and you have borders and you have foreign policy and you have internal policy, this is when you can finally say what is what to a degree. You have
You
somewhat
have
of
your
an
own
official
country,
record.
which you can go to that will stand up
Yeah.
for you in international forums and so
You
on.
have an official
Yeah.
record of some sort. You have actions and reactions decade over decade over decade, and it's more transparent in a way. But when there's no Jewish state and Jews live
Then you're a
here,
stateless person. If you lose your rights as a German, as the Jews did under Nazi Germany with the Nuremberg laws, you lose your rights as a German, you're a stateless person.
yeah, and
So
also,
what can happen to stateless people? They can be liquidated. They can be killed. They have no rights.
and if you
They
don't
can
have
be.
and if you don't have a Jewish state and you live here or you live in that country, that country, it makes it so much harder to defend against this conspiracy mythology because the conspiracy guys can say, "Oh, there's Jews everywhere. There's a Jew here. There's a Jew there. So they're everywhere. So this is the conspiracy,
Well, they
right?"
still say that.
If there's a Jew attached to anything, then the conspiracy guys say the Jew has controlled these things, even if he didn't,
Yeah,
right?
they always make it the Jews control everything, and the same thing. Look, you got on the other side, the Nazis are still there and they're controlling everything. I mean, you got Joseph Farrell and Catherine Austin Fitts, which have this theory about a breakaway civilization because a secret group formed by the remnants of Nazi Germany got away to Antarctica or Argentina. I mean, this thing, Admiral Byrd supposedly fought them, and they have UFOs. Supposedly the flying saucers, Die Glocke. And of course, they claim that America got colonized, taken over. So there's this very conspiratorial. So the banking interests in America are more Nazi, and the elite in America has become Nazified. And of course, Fitz is linked to the global financial system and the black budget especially, and the secret funding mechanisms that sustain the black budget to Nazis in this breakaway civilization. And this is really caught on. There's so many people that believe this, and of course, it's all connected to the UFO. Again, more mythology. You know,
and it's like sometimes when you don't develop, you lose, right? I mean, you can claim traditionalism all day if you want to, but so many countries or quasi structures, so much has failed over the last couple of thousand years. All these structures, they came in, they went, and a lot of these countries or empires and structures, a lot of them failed because they wouldn't develop. They wouldn't progress in various ways. They just stuck to what they've always done. And so when people say, well, change means Jewish conspiracy, everything, if it's against tradition, then it must be part of the conspiracy. It's not that simple. When the Romans got deeper and deeper into Germanic territories, there was a Romanization, especially of the south of Germany, where I am now, and suddenly these Germanic leaders, especially the younger generations, the young princes or whatever they call themselves here, they started to dress in a Roman way. They started to adopt some of these Roman cults, and it became sort of a mixture, a hybrid. And some of these Germans, they realized that some of the Roman stuff had tremendous advantages, and ultimately, I mean, for a time, at a specific time, the Germans had learned so much from the Romans that the Germans could actually reclaim their own sovereignty and drive out the Romans, and they could never get back in the same way they've done before. So it's not change. In certain ways, it's not always bad. It's not always a conspiracy behind it. Sometimes it's just necessary to learn some stuff. and sometimes sticking to traditions can make you lose. I mean, that's the history of Africa, basically, losing to these Europeans because you stick to your old ideas of doing things and magic and just believing that you can conduct warfare like you've done forever, and then these Europeans, they've figured out some new things, and then you lose against them, right? It's not always a conspiracy. Here's the thing. This is a Wall Street Journal exclusive. And it says here, Trump to Wall Street Journal, U.S. was aware of Israel's plans to attack Iran. And there's another story in the Wall Street Journal. It says, in twist, U.S. diplomacy served as cover for Israeli surprise attack. And there's another exclusive story.
Do you really believe that Trump's latest thing on that's saying that he was coordinating a fake dispute with Netanyahu to cover? Do you believe that?
Well, it's happened before. Who knows? I mean, it's like the third thing says how a once resistant Trump decided to back Israel's attacks on Iran. Trump sought to persuade Israel to delay its military operation, but he shifted course after the strikes began. So it's not really clear what the situation is.
Yeah,
but it's like
I think he shifted course after the attacks began because he doesn't want to be perceived as opposing Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they say the encounter came midway through a week that would see Trump go from trying to head off an Israeli attack to backing its sudden campaign of airstrikes, targeting Iran's nuclear facilities and senior military and civilian leaders, an abrupt shift that underscored the fraying prospects for a deal. Trump said Friday that he had been aware of Israel's attack plans and argued that the punishing operation makes a nuclear deal even more likely, though Iran said they were pulling out of a sixth round of talks scheduled for Sunday. But it's like, I mean, overall, it does make it's a compelling, forceful pitch because these Israeli strikes were very, very focused. Now, basically, some say Iran is basically without an air defense. I mean, you saw spectacular Air Force operations by Israel in Iranian airspace. And so it's like a pitch, just dear Iranians, make some reasonable decisions. And then deal with your own stuff. Fix your economy. Do whatever. Did you
see the videos of crowds of Iranians cheering the Israeli strikes?
Yeah, it's like make a proper decision, right?
Yeah,
there's still room for a proper decision.
The regime is destabilized. Yeah, I hope the regime is destabilized by this. Yeah, it's, I saw some British analysis, which I really couldn't believe, saying that, well, Russia's not really supporting Iran, after these strikes. And I'm thinking to myself, but wait a minute, they enabled Russia enabled Iran to get nuclear weapons to be able to build all this. It was all the Iranian nuclear engineers were trained in Russia by the Russians. So they helped them to get here. I mean, this is Russia's big project. Russia wants to see a war in the Middle East because it's going to raise the price of oil. Have you seen what the price of oil is doing?
Yeah.
I bet you that its oil futures are going up. I bet you they're going up.
Yeah, so it's like it says here the possibility that Israel might take military action against Iran has long been a concern for U.S. administrations, which shared the Israelis' anxieties about Iran's growing nuclear efforts and the potential that they might eventually enable Tehran to field a nuclear weapon.
And the question is whether Russia, Lee Wheelbarger is making the claim that the Russians have given Iran weapons. Now, the Russians would control the codes to them. But this would enable the Russians to ignite the Middle East in a way that could definitely allow them, maybe give them an interval to take out Ukraine. Because a war in the Middle East now, if it detracts from Ukraine, might allow the Russians to win. The Chinese, I've heard, are pushing the Russians to go and grab the Baltic states, widen the war, put NATO in a pinch, so that China can do its grab, maybe Taiwan, whatever it is that China's planning. Maybe it's to push against Japan. or even attack the United States. I mean, what is it that they've been doing all these years? Russia and China have been building nuclear weapons to gain a kind of nuclear superiority. Russia is loading up, by the way, and I've seen the pictures. Russia is loading up with road mobile ICBMs in Kaliningrad, in Belarusia, and in Belarus. Why are they assembling? And there's buildings and positions for at least 100 SS-27s. The whole force is 200. Why are they moving so many SS-27s that close to NATO? Because it's a weapon that can go all the way to Antarctica. Why are they doing this? Well, the reason is low trajectory attack can't be intercepted. There's no interception system that can stop a low trajectory SS-27 that's fired and it
Can
just
you
hits
even
the target,
war game
3
this
minutes,
thing?
5
I mean,
minutes.
how do you even war game a global situation like that with modern weaponry? I mean, just for context, right? Just how this whole the whole situation is. The Soviets were standing in northern Iran in 1946 and wanted to take Tehran, but decided against it to have more resources available for Europe. The British were largely responsible for control in the Middle East and conducted itself in the classic fashion of the empire. Some sheikdoms were actual colonial dependencies back then. Serious cracks in the British system were due to high-level infiltration by Soviet intelligence. The highest traitor may have been Lord Louis Mountbatten, whose assistant Baron Ismay became the first Secretary General of NATO. In 1968, the British left the region while maintaining some espionage networks. The Americans mainly wanted to work with Iran under the Shah and with Saudi Arabia. The Shah bought many US weapons and became the most serious military power in the region. The CIA failed at reading the situation, and in 1979, the mullahs took over Iran with the help of the Soviets. Zbigniew Brzezinski wanted to stage a military coup. The United States supported Saddam Hussein in the war against Iran. And larger American military forces in the region were out of the question because the planners expected a major war in Europe. Europe was the priority. Soviet troops were stationed in Afghanistan and were theoretically able to move into Pakistan or Iran. But the performance of the Russians in Afghanistan was already not good, and we saw the usual logistics problems. Up to 24 Russian divisions would have been necessary to invade Iran. The US and the USSR had hundreds of small nuclear weapons ready for a clash in the desert. There were also the man-packed nukes that could be buried to destroy a tunnel or a pass if necessary, detonated remotely, some sort. And in 1982, a Soviet KGB defector formerly stationed in Iran, Vladimir Kuzychkin, gave intelligence to the British MI6, who gave it to the CIA, who in turn handed it over to Iran. This is how Iranians were able to eliminate communist agent networks. The CIA overall knew very little about what was going on in Iran. Then Reagan started the Iranian Covert Action Program. The agency shared more intelligence with Iran and wanted to create sympathies for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. At the same time, preparations were made for armed groups against the Iranian government, just in case, but the plan was hopeless. Iranian officers had often visited US schools, but bigger groups were impossible to set up clandestinely. And in late 1987, it looked as if Iran would launch a naval attack on Saudi Arabia. Iran's President Khatami and the US were getting closer. Then came the US attack against Iraq. The Iranians made everything much harder for Americans. Ultimately, Iran offered the Americans a deal. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad restarted the nuclear program. The US and Israel responded with hacker attacks, mobile internet for dissidents, black ops, a lot of black ops. And now we're in the situation we're in. So it's not like Iran cannot change. I mean, they can make better decisions. They can say, we'll just focus on our own problems and issues. And, how much do the Iranians still believe in terms of conspiracy mythology? Because it's all over the Middle East. Everybody believes this crap.
President Ahmadinejad some years ago held a revisionist historical conference on the Holocaust, Holocaust denial. And this is what the Iranians hosted that. And so they're right on with all of this stuff. The Iranians want this Protocols of the Elders of Zion message and Holocaust denial as part of their national perspective, you might say. And of course, they spread it on social media when they get the chance.
Yeah, so
I can't believe what I've seen on X. By the way, the Iranians are really active on formerly Twitter, now X.
Yeah, some people, I mean, if Muslims, or a lot of Muslims, if they believe the head of the conspiracy sits in Israel, they are tempted to strike at Israel because they think this would be beheading the snake, the conspiracy snake, so to say. But that's kind of the idiocy, because it's like if Muslims nuke Israel and Israel retaliates, nukes a bunch of Muslims, that's not a victory for the Muslims. It's catastrophic for Muslims, and it doesn't help them a thing. It doesn't do a thing for them. It's not beheading anything, any snake, any world conspiracy. The world goes on, and it becomes worse. And so it's like when some people, I mean, in the conspiracy crowd, they've sort of twisted some writings and statements from some ultra hardcore traditionalist Israelis. Some of the most orthodox guys. Some of the most fanatical people, and some of these Israelis, they're so hardcore and so right wing that they almost believe, well, things have always been so bad for Jews, so the big conflict is inevitable. So this is kind of where the doomsday mentality comes in, the apocalyptic mentality comes in. So they almost believe it's a foregone conclusion. And some of this stuff is then twisted by conspiracy influencers. And they say, well, this is the head of the snake, so it's bound to happen anyways. The big nuke war and Israel being defeated, and then the blah third temple or whatever is being rebuilt, and this is all part of the plan. So there's logic out of the window. The
Shiite Muslims believe in the 12th Imam, and they believe that, of course, there's going to be this apocalyptic war, and that the killing of people and the destruction of things is what is going to bring about this 12th Imam. So this has been a concern, that they have this ideology and then they get the bomb. So you've got an apocalyptic ideology. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they will follow through, because they might be more rational than that, but then maybe they're not. Maybe they actually have these magical thinking and this belief that they could use the bomb in this way. And this, of course, is an added concern for people in the West and in Israel, where they could use it against us. Look, who's to say that the Iranians can't get a missile to Europe?
Sure.
Their missiles have the range to reach Europe. I think they can reach where you are, just about, with some of those intermediate range ballistic missiles, at least reach into the heart of Europe. And of course, this is a real problem, because if you have a nuclear detonation in the Middle East, what is then the role of the United States? Does all these Muslim fanatics go nuts and say it's the 12th Imam, and they start a general jihad against Europe and the West? And then how does Russia and China exploit that? You get people excited about that.
It's not like the old days of jihad. It's not like you can still do it the way it's been done hundreds of years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or even longer ago.
But now it's the new style, because there's millions of Muslims in Europe that are very upset and could be mobilized or agitated, believing. I mean, imagine if all the Muslims in Europe who feel discriminated against, or feel like, they want to have some muscle in Europe, and they suddenly Tel Aviv is nuked and the Jews are destroyed, and the Muslims don't care how many nuclear hits they take, and they just go nuts in Europe, and there's large terrorist cells. You've got to know, in Europe, of Muslim terrorists. I mean, what is the possibility of Europe being completely disrupted by a fanatical uprising of Muslims? I mean, look at the Muslim youth that now, 18 years ago, 19 years ago, burned 20,000 cars in France,
Hmm.
or was it 30,000 cars? And I mean, the rioting in America, I mean, the Russians and Chinese like this idea of creating a mob within a country, a violent, angry mob, and something sets them off, and they start burning Paris, or they start burning German cities, or like they're doing in your country, slashing at people's necks with knives, out of despair. The communists always seem to go for the despairing people and
Yeah.
getting those despairing people to revolt.
Yeah, it's like the victim mentality. We're the good group, we're the downtrodden, we've been treated so badly, and our day will come. Blah blah blah. It's like it's the same script for every group out there. It doesn't matter what group it is. They all work with the same techniques. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to Europe, I mean all the Muslims that came here and they started a life here. They came here legally or they came here illegally, and they started a life and all that comes with it. They've got families here too. They've got their all elderly parents, they got their grandparents, they got their sisters and their cousins, and everybody's around, and it makes it harder for them. I mean, there's a hardcore section who would love to start a fight, but there are rules to jihad. There's a whole strategy concept for jihad, and usually when you're in a minority, when your people are vulnerable, not just the fighters, because not every Muslim here is a fighter. There's so many women here and elderly people, they can't fight. When you're in a vulnerable spot, you don't do the violent jihad. You try a cultural approach. You try a different approach. You just want to try different things, and so it's a complicated mess, and all sorts of people are now confronted with a reality that everybody tried to either ignore or explain with these strange ideas that everything is a foregone conclusion. I mean, if people know about Islam, they kind of think that everything is planned, that everything is foregone conclusion, and everything will go along, go along a certain plan, and you have initiative. That's Muslims, they want to take initiative, but it's all Allah. It's all He makes the decisions. If it goes this way or that way, it's all part of the plan, and He makes the decisions. So it's confusing to people when it becomes real, when it's no longer making threats or saying things about Israel, saying things about Europeans and Americans and the unbelievers. When it gets real, it's a different situation. I think it's a different ball game, and it's the same for Muslims or non-Muslims or Ukrainians or right wingers or left wingers.
The German Muslim population is between 5.3 and 5.6 million people, which is what, about 7% of the population.
Yeah, but how many of those are fit, healthy men capable of fighting? And how many of them can fight? Yeah. How many of them can actually fight? I mean, it's one thing if you do the traditional terrorist thing and you just drive a truck through a crowd of people or you stab some people on the street, but in terms of organized fighting, actual battle, how many of them can actually do it? And
if you've got even 50,000 of them are trained terrorists, you've got a problem, don't you?
Sure, but it's like there's so much espionage going on here. It's been built into Europe, and especially after 1945, there's been a whole bunch of new espionage built into everything. So this was when there was some stuff happened in, I think it was Belgium, when somebody leaked something that all these places were bugged before all these Muslims moved into them. There's so many things that we don't fully know, or some people don't know about it at all, that have an impact on what could potentially happen in the near future. So it's like everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face.
Yeah. France has an even bigger Muslim population. There's 6.7 million, and France has less people than Germany. I think it's 10% of their population is now Muslim,
Yeah.
which is getting to be significant. And of course, the birth rate in Germany, doesn't Germany have one of the lowest birth rates in Europe? Do you know
Yeah,
what the birth rate is?
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's like the European Union. The European Union wants to become a Mediterranean Union, so that's why they bring in more Africans and more Muslims, because they want to control everything and expand. And so they have like this sophisticated approach that is supposed to look like absolute garbage. It's supposed to look like uncoordinated, messy, and ideological, and this, that, and the other. But there's such experienced nations here. The French. I mean, the French, they had colonies and the French had colonies in Northern Africa. They've had all the uprisings there, and they had large insurgencies, and the French were able to destroy these insurgencies. And now you have all these digital tools and all the wargaming tools, and there's so much expertise when it comes to counterinsurgency. It's massive, and most people are not even aware of it anymore. Because they think that everybody who knew about counterinsurgency is long dead, but there's a tremendous amount of expertise here. It's impossible to tell how this is going to play out, in country by country, if this is all going to work this way or the other way. But it's a scary situation when it turns global, when it's multiple areas of actual war, and there's more areas of uprisings and insurgencies. It's people think about their future, even these Muslim men who dream about a new empire, dream about a new caliphate, because they don't have one. They haven't had one in 100 years or more. It's like they've been changed, and the internet played a large part in that. I mean, this is what Eric Schmidt, who's also I think he's also at Bilderberg again. He's Eric Schmidt, former head of Google. He's been at Bilderberg so many times, and he's put out a book. I think it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I reviewed it back then on my channel. And Eric Schmidt wrote this book with a security specialist, and he said that the internet changes everything, and if you use technology, you will make mistakes. And if you choose to not use technology, you will lose in your questionable endeavors. So it's either be so backwards you can't win, or use technology and make mistakes and lose, right? And it's when they talked about this at Bilderberg meetings like 10 years ago and 5 years ago, they said that there will be back then they said there will be another billion more people that use the internet in the next couple of years, right? And then maybe another billion or another 500 million on top of that. So this happened in stages. Yeah. They talked about this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and 20 years ago. They said more and more people are going to use the internet in Africa, the Latinos, the Muslims, and it will change them. Because you can always sneak stuff in and counter the way they're doing things, and if they organize a riot and insurgency with the help of electronic gadgets, they will lose. This is what Schmidt believes, and these Bilderbergers believe.
I don't understand. Why would they lose if they use the internet to make flash mobs? Isn't that
because
been successful?
it's everything is under surveillance. Everything is being digitally broken into, and you always know in advance, or mostly know in advance, when something significant happens. Besides lone wolf attacks, right? So this was kind of the logic of these Americans that go to Bilderberg, and they said that you either avoid technology, or you use technology and you lose. And we saw that with the Israelis and Israel's plot operation with these exploding pagers. With the Palestinians, they were using pagers and radios because they thought they don't want to use the internet. They want to use other technologies like radios and pagers, the telephone system. But then these devices explode, right? And this is stuff that, who knows how many other operations like these exist They haven't been launched yet. They haven't been triggered yet. But they might be there. So it's like when you try to judge these European countries, they know what they're doing, but they're supposed to. They want to look like idiots. They want to look like they don't know what they're doing. And I think they let in a lot of Muslims and a lot of Africans, but they had contingency plans. How good they are, that's hard to tell. That's hard to tell. Oh, by the way, did you see that? You saw that one thing with the conference in Russia, which is almost like a Russian Bilderberg thing, right? They called it the Forum of the Future. This was from June 9th to June 10th in Russia. This big conference, right?
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's like they had Errol Musk, the father of Elon Musk, at this conference. They had Alex Jones. They had, I think, George Galloway. They had a bunch of very important Russians. I think Sergei Lavrov and leftists, quite a few leftists, and they talked about, as if this was a Bilderberg meeting, how to preserve the glory of Russia, how to move forward and create this preserve this authoritarian empire and expand it. And at first we believed that Alex Jones, the conspiracy influencer, was going to personally attend, but he recorded a video for them. And it's like when somebody like Jones gets confronted about this, he will say, I'm a conservative, the Russians are conservative, so where's the problem? But look at these other guests. Look at these leftist guests, right? I mean, there was like this guy, this old Marxist from Britain, who's like the most classic pro-Russian Soviet guy. And some modern guys, some of these modern leftist guys who were associated with media organizations that hate Alex Jones, and Alex Jones hates them. So the Russians are playing all these groups, and it's evident in the selection of these guests of this Russian Bilderberg type clone thing. Is that you go there as a supposed conservative, but there's also these leftists there. And who will guarantee you that with a Russian expansion, that this system will be what you want it to be, that this will be a conservative system? I mean, I've been saying this for decades now. If the Russians get control here in Europe, if the Russians control us, they can do whatever they want. They can bring more Muslims here, which they control. They can bring Chinese people here. They can bring Africans here. They can bring, more socialist elements into this thing and have some traditionalist stuff sprinkled on top of it, not what the right wing wants. They can do what the Soviets had always done, which is strategically move and shift around populations so the Russian Empire benefits. Because this is what even traditional empires used to do when they expanded and they had different populations. They tried to control them and have a balance. So one group within your empire is not outpacing the other group within your empire. And you would allow them, even the Romans did this, and I think even the Greeks did this, you would allow a little bit of autonomy for the different groups in your empire. This traditional stuff, some traditions here, some traditions there, to placate them. But it's still central rule. So how can you go to a conference or submit a video to a Russian conference like this, if you're Alex Jones, and argue this is going to be in favor of conservatism and Christianity, and this is all going to be so nice? When there's a ton of Muslims in Russia right now. The Muslim population in Russia is very, very large. There's a lot of Russian Muslims. They're building huge mosques, and they're having more babies, these Muslims in Russia. And it's like when a lot of people in Russia are not Christians. They may be listed as Christians, but they follow these old heathen type, cults, these very old Russian cults, and a very large section of the Russian population is into general occultism. There's more occult healers than doctors in Russia, right? There's more occult healers. So how can you say this is going to work in favor of Christian conservatives when you support this Russian system? And I think that there was this other thing, a like half-hour debate between Alex Jones and a guy named Drew Pavlou. I've heard this name before, but I've never really seen this guy. I've never seen his work. And I think this Drew Pavlou guy called out Alex Jones over Ukraine, saying how ridiculous Jones's stance on the topic is. And so Jones, he thought, well, I have to yell at this guy, I have to confront this guy so I can seem dominant and whatever. So they talked for like half an hour. And I got the transcript, the automated transcript from YouTube, and highlighted a few sections here. And so Jones essentially sounds like a Soviet official from the Cold War. It's exactly the same way of responding, always repeating the talking points, never really changing anything, always claiming moral superiority. So Jones exactly sounds like a Soviet official from the older era. And this Pavlou guy, he starts out and he rapid fires his talking points, so to limit the scope that Jones can then use. So this Pavlou guy says, yeah, I know you want to paint me as a globalist, you're going to paint me as a leftist, but I'm neither of those. The Chinese communists hate me, they try to kidnap me, Australian police is aware of that. The Russians, they killed so many Ukrainians a long time ago. How can you expect Ukrainians to be Russians? I don't want total war. We want a deal, but the Russians are not going to give us any reasonable deal. I want peace. I don't want war. I'm not for. He says I'm not for nuclear war either. So don't even try that gambit. And then he says, Mr. Jones, I just don't understand how it can be fair that you're reserving so much outrage and anger for the Ukrainians when they blow up Russian bomber jets, but I don't see that from you, Mr. Jones, when they're bombing the Ukrainians. And then he says, I've been there. I've been in Ukraine. I'm not just sitting on a desk in Austin, Texas. I've been to Ukraine, where the people die and where the missiles hit. And so there's not much left that Jones can respond with. So he says something like, oh, well, you just this, all you give us is emotional appeals. And then Jones tries this old stuff about Ukrainian Nazis, blah, blah, blah. He says Zelensky has a Cookie Monster voice. This is Alex Jones making fun of Zelensky having a raspy voice. Okay? Right? And
Alex Jones's voice is raspy.
Yeah, I mean, he's got vocal cord damage. It's not just like, got a mature voice. Alex Jones has severe vocal cord damage. And then this Pavlou guy says this, 7 million Ukrainians fought for the Soviet Union in World War II. You can't say that the Ukrainians all saw Hitler as a liberator. Zelensky's own grandfather fought for the Soviets in World War II. And so Jones has nothing left. Jones has got nothing. Jones tries this. He says, what I'm saying to you is Americans don't want to pay $300 billion for this war, and I think Trump should leave NATO. Yeah, but I mean, it's like, what about the minerals deal? Jones must know about the minerals deal. Jones must know that you can rebuild. It's not just a money pit. And he must know that things can get way more expensive in terms of security if America at some point is without any allies. That's gonna be pricey, really pricey. And yeah, it's like when I look at Jones, I mean, Jones will always say, "I don't take Russian money." Jones says, I would never take Russian money. I'm totally independent, blah 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 whatsoever." But we've heard that before from others. There was this German star journalist. I think he was named Seipel, and he got all the awards, the journalism. He got the big projects, the big best-selling books and the biggest TV mainstream documentaries. He was even invited to Russia. He was up close and personal with Vladimir Putin when nobody else could get close to Putin. They went hunting together and got all this footage, and they got all these Russian talking points on German national mainstream TV. And so people started asking this star journalist, have you ever taken Russian money? Which is a straightforward, open question. And this guy became indignant and said, "How dare you suggest that? That's such a low blow. I can't believe you would stoop so low and insinuate I would take Russian money. I am outraged." And then a short while later, a few years later, it came out that this guy actually got a contract, which was in just one contract that got leaked. Who knows what else was there? He got a contract for 600,000 euros, more than $500,000, for one book project. And he sounded like Jones. "I'm outraged. I'm mad. I won't take this anymore. I'm mad." And he sounds exactly the same. So I don't trust
Like
what
Jones.
anybody says.
No, well, you can't trust people like that. I was this week. I saw a very fascinating interview Jonathan Fink did on his Silicon podcast with Alexander Nevzorov. And Nevzorov said some things about Russia and Ukraine that I thought were interesting, and I thought I would quote from him. He said that he said this is terrible, this situation in Ukraine, because it's a story of wild lust, and he says it's geopolitical lust, and he says Ukraine has always been the object of Russian adoration. And then he corrected himself. He says, well, not exactly adoration. They've strived to possess it because it's absurdly rich. The soil is rich, of course, there. And he depicts Russia, Mother Russia, as a lesbian in love with its more successful self, and that the Ukrainians are really different because the soil is different, because the history is different. And of course, the Muscovy has always been a very poor soil. The drunken, envious peasant who can't really make anything of this terrible soil, and so feeling very sorry for himself. It's always a bad thing when people feel sorry for themselves. So there's a natural linkage with the sort of the Bolshevik ideology of appealing to people who feel sorry for themselves, that are downtrodden. And of course, this lesbian Russia loves Ukraine so much they want to destroy Ukraine. It's a malignant, sadistic passion, a malignant envy. Envy is when you admire somebody or adore them so much you want to destroy them because they make you look bad, or they make you feel bad about yourself. And he said, and so like like a maniac who needs at least something, that's when Russia says, "I see her legs and I'll cut them off and keep them for myself."
Great.
And this is Russia's attitude towards Ukraine, and it's quite brilliant commentary that he made. And he said it's an attempt to hold on to a few regions, cut off legs, and it's not. It's almost difficult for us to conceive, and that Putin, once having started this this propaganda, this anti-Ukrainian, Ukraine has no agency. The West is doing it, so we're going to cut off her legs. She's become the whore of the West, so to speak. This is the desire to possess the severed legs, and this is the calamity of this kind of propaganda where the Russians have been enraged into this, and this is why people in Russia are going along with it. You look at alcoholism in Russia, you look at how the men have been disempowered by the Soviet regime and then the successor regime under Putin, and they're demoralized. And with demoralized people, you can create these narratives where they feel sorry for themselves, and you could create this lust to cut off the legs and own them. And this is what Putin has done, and he really can't stop. It's become a part of him, is what Nevzorov is saying. And I think it's true, but I also think there is this alliance with China and Iran and this desire to possess Europe as well and to destroy the United States. And I think this is really part of it. He didn't speak to that. He spoke culturally of the Russian psychology. But this is what the communists and their desire for power and control of the world. And I do believe I do believe that Putin is a communist. Whatever that means, by the way, because that's not an easy thing. You've got what Eric Voegelin called it, the new Gnosticism, right? Ideology as religion, religion as salvation through politics. And of course, that salvation is to assuage the non-entity. Oh, I've discovered I'm a non-entity. I hate myself. I'm going to cut off the legs, right? I mean, that's basically what Voegelin's saying communism is to begin with. So I think that's what is being confronted. And I think there's, among the mullahs in Iran, I think you have a similar psychology.
Yeah, I mean the scope of it all. I mean, here's a current investigation, right? This is from the Insider, and it's about this guy who's like this big spider type figure. His name is Oleg Deripaska. Okay, he's been everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
The guy that made the Telegram? No, Deripaska is.
He's this industrialist guy.
Yeah, and, Deripaska is an oligarch, a Russian oligarch.
Yeah, and he's had some run-ins with highest ranking German politicians in the past, and trying to create more connections and ultimately business connections. So this guy has been everywhere.
There were people trying to connect him to Trump, weren't there, several years ago?
Well, the Russians always try to get to Trump, and it's like at some point, many Americans and Europeans were encouraged to create connections with the Russians. I mean, there's always multiple reasons, or used to be multiple reasons in the past for seeking these connections. I mean, as I said, a lot of especially the security government entities here in the West, they always try to get closer to Russians by making deals with them, trying to get into their head, maybe trying to have unofficial channels of communication, maybe influence Russia in one way or the other. So it's a high stakes game where the risk is, or the risk used to be for the biggest part, that Russia gains credibility when it shouldn't, and Russia gains, market access when it really shouldn't. So who knows how many operations have failed? And it's like when the Russians have high-ranking moles in the West, these moles can support some of these double-dealing games of the Russians. When, let's say, Western countries, they reach out to the Russians, they make deals with the Russians with good intentions, trying to change Russia, but then it all falls flat on its face. West just gets exploited. The West, the Russians get more money from us, and they get more tech from us, and the Russians gain credibility, and we're left with nothing. Who knows how many of these operations have actually failed? And this guy, Now they say they say Russian billionaire Oleg Deripaska's businesses are cashing in on the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is trying to hide it. An investigation by the Insider has uncovered his connection to companies producing armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, and military-grade armored cars for the Russian Military of Defense. Deripaska has long been entwined with the MOD, after all. The Insider previously discovered that the mistress and illegitimate children of Russia's former defense minister Sergei Shoigu had been enjoying the use of Deripaska's private jet. And so this is kind of like the currently one of the backbones of the Russian military. And the Russians had learned from the West how to hide money, especially internationally, and how to invest money in the West and use shell companies and use some of these special places to enjoy privacy with businesses. And so it becomes like this monumental task of untangling everything. Because how can you have effective sanctions if you can't find these people or find their people and find their shell companies and all that they got going on? It says here, following the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the imposition of Western sanctions, it became increasingly inconvenient for Deripaska to act as the official owner of a defense manufacturer. He claimed to have exited the military-industrial company's share capital in 2019. However, an investigation by the Insider casts serious doubt on that claim, as top positions across multiple companies involved in the production of armored vehicles are still held by managers personally linked to Deripaska. So there you go. Most companies in that group conceal their beneficial owners. So following the money becomes quite a task. It becomes quite a task. And some of these people in their networks, they still have ties to the West. They still know these people from back in the older days when things seemed a lot calmer. And so now it becomes like this question of can Europe and can the US administration, can they close down on all the loopholes? Because you can't, the Ukrainians had found all these Western-made parts in these Russian vehicles, these armored personnel carriers, these armored smaller cars that cost like 300,000 euros or dollars. And so they found all kinds of parts from Germany, parts from parts from France, all kinds of stuff. And even when the Russians make some parts themselves, they use Western machinery to make these precision parts. Because how can you make an engine? How can you make a reliable, powerful engine if it's not precision? How can you ensure the precision? You need precision measurement tools and precision manufacturing tools. Where do you get that? From the West. And so I think now the allies of Russia all of these allies of Russia, they have to question what they became part of. It's always an attractive idea to latch on to a bully, to go to the guy with the strongest, biggest arms and work for that guy or work with that guy. But what if he's not the strongest guy? What if he's going to leave you in the dust? What if Russia is going to pull back some of the resources and focus on Russia's own needs, leaving certain allies in the dust? Because how many things can you hide at this point?
Mm-hmm.
How many things can you deliver to Iran? How many things can you deliver to the front in Ukraine? How many things can you equip into these vehicles, like night vision, stuff that the Europeans have, stuff that the Americans have,
Yeah.
stuff that they can
The
deliver.
question is to what extent the Russians are sandbagging and that they have more than the Western experts think. And all the Western experts don't agree. I've been looking at Wheelbarger's information on Russia, and I don't know, but it seems to me that, look, they just passed 1 million casualties, right, in the war of the Russians. They attacked, we know it wasn't 190,000 troops initially, it was over 300,000. They have raised, since the beginning of the war now, almost 1.5 million troops since the beginning of the war. They've lost, 1 million. Not all the wounded, though, are not in the war anymore. So maybe half the wounded. So if you actually do the numbers, their armies are getting bigger. Their army is getting bigger. It's not they're even by the statistics that are accepted, the number of troops they're creating are greater than the number they're losing. And that means, what is this buildup in the Baltic states? Are they going to move on that? Of course, Lukashenko in Belarus has said that no, the Zapad 25 exercise is going to be further east. We want to make NATO feel better about it, and that's a comforting thought. If they do that, then they're showing that they're not going to attack NATO in the fall. And of course, if we see the Zapad exercise shaping up to be in eastern Ukraine, and the Ukrainians eastern Belarus, the Ukrainians seem to say that the offensive is going to come to Sumy, which is on the east side of the river, and that Russia is still concentrating on that side of Ukraine in their offensives. So it's starting to look like the Russians are bluffing about going against NATO and the Baltic states, but you can't be sure. With this pressure, I think what they're setting up for is whether Trump abandons NATO completely, and Trump doesn't seem to be doing this. And I don't know if you've noticed this, it almost seems like they're trying to give blackmail hints to Trump. You saw the conflict between Elon Musk and
Yes.
Trump, where Musk mentions, Jeffrey Epstein, and you have Jeffrey Epstein's one of the leaders of the Communist Party USA supposedly bought one of Epstein's black books, address books, from eBay, from some woman on eBay that found it on a Manhattan sidewalk, and it's being auctioned. The guy wants to make $50,000 off of it. Is this like a hint to Trump? Oh, we know about things about you, and this is like a signaling him, we can show more than an address book with your name in it. Is this an attempt to pressure Trump to abandon Ukraine or abandon NATO? Is this an actual, are these subtle threats?
Yeah, but how much can you play that card when Trump is so old? And people have noticed that he's getting more tired.
Musk said he's going to die soon. I think was one of the comments Musk made.
Talking more, yeah.
But Musk is backing
gibberish.
away from his attacks. Yeah,
talking more gibberish and things like that. So it's like when if theoretically the Russians have some cards like that, playing it. Really playing it, I think, would be a great danger for Russia, and also when it comes to Epstein. Epstein was somewhat listed as a source for the FBI. They never wanted to be more specific about it, but some documents came to light, and Epstein was some sort of a source for the FBI. He used to say, I also, work or have a connection to the CIA. Then there was, I think it was Sigal Mandelker from some government agency in the US who deals with enforcing sanctions or trying to find people who evade sanctions. And I think for Sigal Mandelker, Epstein was also some sort of a source. So the moment Epstein possibly became a source, and the moment, at any point, theoretically, hypothetically, the moment Trump may have been involved in some sort of sting operations. I mean, especially with his old mentor, Roy Cohn. The moment they have some sort of official mandate or are listed somewhere or had been listed somewhere as assets for helping along a specific mission, I think Trump would be safe. I think others would be safe. If push comes to shove, somebody pulls out some old documents and they declassify it and black out some sections and say, well, Trump did some supporting work for some operations, and that's just that. And so I don't know if the Russians can play a card like that without having a massive fallout.
Why is Trump not? I mean, look, Trump said on the 26th. He said that he was going to do sanctions on Russia, I think, in 2 weeks. He said that in early May, too, I think, because Putin is not coming to a ceasefire. He's not doing, I mean, look at all the things that Trump did against Ukraine. But now Putin is obviously the intransigent one. He's the one that's killing people. He's the one that's persisting in the war. And this is now obvious to Trump, and Trump has called him, crazy, absolutely crazy, and so on. But Trump, rather than increasing help for Ukraine or going for sanctions, he's using this war in the Middle East as an excuse to, send military supplies to Israel that should have been sent to Ukraine.
Or maybe Trump has been briefed, and Trump is waiting for the Russians to make the next move first before the new sanctions. When the Russians move into the Baltics or Finland, the Baltics or Finland, that would be a perfectly strategic time to really crank up the sanctions, and Trump could be in the public
they need
view
to put the sanctions on now before NATO becomes embroiled in a war, before this war widens and it goes nuclear. I mean, you want to, the Russians, I mean, I think they're differently rational, Putin and that gang. They're not normal. And so they're capable of doing things that are really brutal and by our standards crazy, and so you have to try to contain it as best you can. And of course, Ukraine has been the shield of Europe, giving Europe time to rebuild, because Europe is not ready. Your country's not ready for war.
But also when the Russians make the next move, it also splits up Russian forces. I mean, it's not like it's all golden for the Russians when they do the next thing. When the
Russians can have a huge mobilization. They've taken all kinds of people off the list of people that are eligible for being mobilized. They could mobilize it. We don't know what their factories have produced, and I'm quite worried about it. And the number of training centers the Russians have operating, the number of tanks and APCs, I think they've got hidden away, because they don't park their vehicles out in the open. They put them in buildings, and they put them in underground bunkers and stuff. So we don't know what the numbers are, and it worries me. I mean, I'd like to think the Russians are exhausted, but they're not acting like they're exhausted.
I would have preferred a president with a very clear background, something with either the military or diplomacy or both, or somebody who has been completely straight as an arrow his entire life and no scandals and nothing, and who's always been very clear on the Russians and the Chinese. I mean, I would have applauded such a different president.
I mean, do you think Elon Musk's behavior, is he working with the Chinese and the Russians? When he threatens Trump like that, is he relaying a blackmail threat and then he takes it back? I mean, to associate for Elon Musk as an ally of Trump, and for him to say these things about Trump, means that Elon Musk has been working with a guy that he knows is a pedo. I mean, is that the implication, that this is the kind of, I mean, Musk's statements are pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like these people are weird enigmas, and
you're not kidding.
I wish it was very, very clear cut, but they are enigmas, and strategically it can have
are they enigmas, or are they just clowns?
yeah, maybe one or the other, maybe both, but it's sometimes it's strategically an advantage if you have people around who seem
Crazy people
like
in charge.
who seem like clowns or who seem like enigmas and super hard to read, because when it gets really serious, you never want to show your cards. You never want to let the other side know who makes the decisions and who has what
Well,
influence.
sometimes you do because you want to avoid a nuclear war. If somebody gets really paranoid
Yeah.
that you're going to do something and they think you are a madman or a clown, they might preemptively do something they otherwise wouldn't do because the situation has become so befogged
Yeah. But at the same
that
time, I
you're
mean, you
scared
saw the
and you
guys.
think you need to do something.
But
Yeah.
you saw the guys they have at the Bilderberg meeting now in Sweden. You know, these clear cut military guys, very straightforward. And there's other Bilderberg members that they're tied to the Trump administration, and they're so straight and they're so traditional and very straightforward.
You're
And
talking
it's so
about
much,
American generals?
yeah, some of these American generals and some other guests that are at Bilderberg right now, and they're very clear. They're super clear where they stand. They've always been very clear. They have some personal connections to these issues, family background to these issues, like Ukraine. Some of these people, they've trained their entire lives and worked their entire lives for American interests, and they've never seen Russia as a partner. They've never trusted the Chinese. So these are people that are tied to the Trump administration. So
I mean, do you have confidence in these generals? I mean, did you see Hegseth's interactions with Vindman, the congressman, in the congressional hearings this week? Did you see that?
yeah, but that's like the contrast, right? It's
Did you see that? Well, Hegseth was asked. He was asked how many ships will be in the Chinese fleet by 2030, and it was something like 425 or something. And he didn't know. He says, I don't know. Um, he says, what is the territory called that's between Kaliningrad and Belarus that would connect them? That's along the Lithuanian. And he couldn't name the Savaki Gap. The U.S. Defense Secretary didn't know what the Savaki Gap was, and then he asked him, well, what is this little Russian enclave between Lithuania and Poland? And he couldn't name that either. And he said, he basically accused Vindman of giving him a test. You're quizzing me. It's like, but the U.S. Defense Secretary should know what Kaliningrad is, should know what the Savaki Gap is, and he doesn't. He doesn't know those basic. I mean, I was dumbfounded. What is Hegseth doing? If he's the Secretary of Defense and he's never heard of the Savaki Gap or Kaliningrad, is that? Yeah. I mean, I watched it over and over again. I couldn't believe my eyes. What is wrong with these people?
But it's like, I mean, one of the foundational ways of conducting warfare or preparing warfare is if you're strong.
Put a clown in charge?
No. If you're strong in a specific way, you want to appear weak. If you're weak in a specific area, you want to appear strong. If you're smart,
want to invite attack, you appear weak.
if you're smart about something, you act like you're dumb about it. And it's like it's always a wider team, and it's always like nobody is quite supposed to know. No. He may actually be very uneducated about very important things about his job, but he's not. He's just one guy. And there are many people.
He's the guy in charge of the Pentagon. He's the one
on paper, yes.
Charge.
On paper, yes. But it's like he can be replaced. I mean, he's just a guy, right? I mean, the United States has functioned without him, and it will continue to function without him. It will just go on, and that's something that's always in the back of my mind when we look at these characters, and then you look at these on the ground military guys and all these preparations that are being done, and when they're asked when Marines are training in Sweden, and these commanding officers are being asked, well, what about the politics? And they say, I'm not a politician. I know politicians may change, but I have very clear orders, and they don't change. There's no change. So we do what we do, and that's that. So I try to see the big picture. And this, it becomes increasingly harder to do because of the obfuscation factor, right? You don't want to show your cards. You don't want to let on what you can do and what you cannot do. It's like, it's always I see this with the Europeans. They try, European governments, they try to look so dumb and ideological and like
Are you sure
morons.
they're pretending?
Like some of them are morons, and they don't know what they're doing, but it's still Europe. There's still this huge long history of being in control and scheming and planning ahead and having these 50-year plans and 100-year plans and always scheming and scheming and scheming and scheming. And the Europeans kind of invented this blueprint of having a political theater. Back in the old days, it was just, okay, the same few people, they run everything. But then it seemed so complicated all of a sudden and different and it seemed too complex for people to comprehend, because now there's so many politicians and all these ideologies and everybody's pulling in another direction, and it's like, well, the Europeans, they kind of created some sort of a blueprint to not show their cards, to say one thing and do the other, and the British with their theater towards the Nazis, acting like they're friendly towards the Nazis. Meanwhile, British prepared all sorts of things. These plans, or this scheming, not always works the way it's intended. I mean, there's been books written about it. I mean, even Professor Carol Quigley wrote about this, saying this was a dumb decision by secret British circles to placate the Nazis and play the Nazis, because if they had been straight from the get-go and coordinated with other countries, maybe this war could have been prevented, World War II. But somebody had this idea. No, we're going to play theater. We're going to scheme and play nice with the Nazis and do all this crap, and it was a bad choice for most people. And
yeah, it was a bad choice for the 56 million people who died in World War II in Europe. Well, anyway, we've got about 2 hours or so. So I think it's time to wrap it up. I'm Jeff Nyquist. This has been Friends and Enemies. My co-host has been Alex Benish, and we've been talking about the current crisis. So I hope you'll join us next week at this time.